Have you ever noticed how some of the heaviest things you carry in life are not even visible? Not the responsibilities, not the work, not the expectations, but the memories, the regrets, and the people you should have let go of a long time ago. You tell yourself it is normal. You convince yourself that this is just how life is supposed to feel. But deep down, there is something quietly draining you, something that does not leave no matter how much time passes. The truth is, you are not just holding on. You are hurting from it. Maybe it is a relationship that already ended but still lives in your thoughts every single day. Maybe it is something someone said years ago that continues to shape how you see yourself. Or maybe it is the version of who you used to be, the mistakes you made, the things you wish you could undo but cannot. These are the things that stay with you, not because they are meant to, but because you have not allowed yourself to let them go. And here is the part most people do not want to admit. We do not always hold on because something is good for us. We hold on because it feels familiar. We hold on because letting go feels like losing a piece of ourselves. We hold on because even pain can feel safer than stepping into the unknown. But what if the things you refuse to release are the exact things keeping you stuck? What if your peace, your growth, and your freedom are waiting on the other side of something you are too afraid to drop? This is not just about moving on or pretending that nothing ever happened. It is about understanding that not everything deserves your energy. It is about realizing that holding on is not always a sign of strength. Sometimes, it is the very thing that is breaking you slowly, quietly, and consistently. You live in a world that constantly tells you to care about everything. Care about your past, your image, your mistakes, and what other people think of you. But there is a truth that most people avoid because it is uncomfortable. Not everything deserves a place in your life. And maybe the reason you feel so heavy right now is not because life is hard, but because you have been carrying things you were never meant to keep. So now the question becomes, are you holding on to things that are slowly breaking you, or are you finally ready to let go? The hardest part about letting go is not the act itself. It is the belief that if you let go, something important will be lost forever. You start to think that holding on means you are loyal, that it means you care deeply, that it proves something about your character. But in reality, holding on for too long often says something else. It says you are afraid. Afraid to face a version of your life that no longer includes what once defined you. Think about it. How many times have you stayed attached to something that was clearly hurting you, simply because you invested so much time into it? A relationship that drained you, a dream that no longer felt like yours, a version of yourself that you outgrew a long time ago. You keep telling yourself that it will get better, that maybe if you try harder, things will change. But deep down, you already know the truth. You are not holding on because it is right. You are holding on because it is hard to accept that it is over. There is a kind of pain that comes from loss, but there is a deeper kind of pain that comes from refusing to accept that loss. And that second kind of pain lingers. It follows you into your decisions, your relationships, and even the way you see yourself. It shapes your identity in ways you do not even realize. You start to define yourself by what hurt you. You become the person who was betrayed, the person who failed, the person who was not enough. And without noticing, you begin to build your life around those labels. You avoid risks because you are afraid of repeating the same pain. You hold back from people because you expect the same outcome. You limit yourself, not because you cannot grow, but because you are still tied to something that already ended. This is where most people get stuck, not because they are weak, but because they misunderstand what it means to care. They believe that caring means never letting go. That if something mattered, it should stay with you forever. But that is not true. Caring does not mean holding on to everything. It means choosing what is worth holding on to. And that choice is what changes everything. When you refuse to let go of what hurts you, you are not protecting your past. You are sacrificing your future. You are giving your energy to something that can no longer give anything back. And over time, that drains you. It makes you feel stuck, lost, and disconnected from the life you could be living. Letting go, on the other hand, is not about forgetting or pretending that something did not matter. It is about accepting that it no longer belongs in your present. It is about recognizing that just because something was important does not mean it is meant to stay. This is a difficult truth because it forces you to confront something deeper. It forces you to ask yourself what you are really afraid of. Is it the pain of letting go, or is it the uncertainty of what comes next? Because once you let go, there is space. And that space can feel uncomfortable. It can feel empty, but it is also where something new has the chance to grow. Most people never reach that point because they fill that space too quickly. They jump from one attachment to another, from one distraction to the next, just to avoid feeling that emptiness. But growth does not happen when you avoid the space. It happens when you allow yourself to sit in it. When you stop holding on to what hurts you, you start to see things more clearly. You begin to understand that not everything that enters your life is meant to stay. Some things are there to teach you, to shape you, to show you what you value and what you do not. And once that lesson is learned, holding on serves no purpose. It only keeps you stuck in a chapter that has already ended. And the truth is, you cannot move forward if you are constantly looking back. You cannot become someone new if you are still attached to who you used to be. Growth requires change, and change requires letting go. This does not mean it will be easy. There will be moments when you question your decision, when you feel the urge to go back to what is familiar, even if it hurts. That is normal. But you have to remind yourself why you chose to let go in the first place. You chose to let go because you deserve peace. You chose to let go because you deserve to grow. You chose to let go because holding on was costing you more than you were willing to admit. And at some point, you have to ask yourself a simple but uncomfortable question. Is what you are holding on to still helping you become the person you want to be, or is it holding you back from becoming that person? Because the answer to that question will tell you everything you need to know. Letting go is not about losing something. It is about making space for something better. It is about choosing yourself, your future, and your well-being over something that no longer serves you. And once you truly understand that, you will realize that letting go was never the weakness you thought it was. It was the strength you needed all along. There comes a moment in your life when you start to get tired. Not physically tired, but mentally and emotionally exhausted. Tired of overthinking, tired of replaying the same memories, tired of carrying something that no longer makes sense to carry. And in that moment, something shifts. You begin to realize that the pain you are feeling is no longer coming from what happened. It is coming from the fact that you keep holding on to it. That is the turning point. Because for the first time, you stop asking why it happened, and you start asking why you are still allowing it to control you. This is where your power begins to come back. Not when everything is fixed, not when everything makes sense, but when you decide that you are no longer willing to let your past dictate your present. When you finally see that holding on is a choice, even if it does not feel like one. And that realization can be uncomfortable because it removes the excuses. It removes the idea that you are stuck because of what happened to you. It forces you to face the truth that maybe, just maybe, the only thing standing between you and peace is your refusal to let go. That does not mean what you went through was easy. It does not mean it did not matter. It does not mean you should just forget it like it never existed. What it means is that you have a choice now. A choice to keep carrying it, or a choice to finally put it down. And most people underestimate how powerful that choice really is. Because the moment you decide to let go, even just a little, you start to take your energy back. You stop feeding the thoughts that keep you stuck. You stop reopening wounds that were already trying to heal. You stop identifying yourself with something that no longer defines who you are. You begin to separate yourself from the pain. Instead of saying this is who I am, you start to say this is something that happened to me and it is no longer in control of my life. That shift changes everything. Because now you are no longer living in reaction to your past. You are starting to live with intention. You are starting to choose what deserves your attention, your energy, and your emotions. And that is where real freedom begins. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is the moment you decide not to check that message again. The moment you stop revisiting that memory. The moment you choose not to let someone else's actions define your worth. It is in those small decisions that your life starts to change. Because letting go is not a single moment. It is a process. It is something you choose over and over again every time the past tries to pull you back in. And yes, There will be days when it feels like you are going backwards. Days when the memories feel fresh again, when the emotions come rushing back, when you question if you ever really moved on. But that does not mean you failed. It means you are human. The difference now is that you are aware. You recognize what is happening, and instead of getting lost in it, you remind yourself that you have already made a decision to not let it control you anymore. And over time, that decision becomes easier. The weight becomes lighter. The hold it once had on you begins to weaken. Until one day, you look back and realize that the thing you thought you could never let go of no longer has power over you. Not because it disappeared, but because you stopped giving it a place in your life. And that is when you truly understand something most people never fully grasp. You were never meant to carry everything. Some things were only meant to be experienced, learned from, and then released. And once you finally accept that, you stop fighting to hold on. You start choosing to move forward. At some point, you begin to understand that letting go is not about erasing the past. It is about changing your relationship with it. The memories may still be there. The experiences may still have shaped you, but they no longer control how you feel, how you act, or how you see yourself. They become part of your story, not the definition of your identity. And that is an important distinction. Because when you hold on to something that hurts you, you give it power over who you become. You allow it to influence your choices, your confidence, and your direction in life. But when you learn to let go, you take that power back. You begin to rebuild yourself, not based on what broke you, but based on what you choose moving forward. This is where real growth begins. Not when everything is perfect, but when you stop waiting for closure that may never come. When you stop expecting apologies that were never given. When you stop hoping that the past will somehow change if you think about it long enough. Because the truth is, closure is not something you find. It is something you create. You create it when you accept that not all questions will have answers. You create it when you stop searching for meaning in things that were never meant to make sense. You create it when you decide that your peace is more important than your need to understand everything. And that can be one of the hardest things to do. To accept that some chapters of your life ended without explanation. That some people walked away without giving you the closure you deserved. That some things simply did not turn out the way you hoped they would. But acceptance is what sets you free. Because the longer you resist reality, the longer you stay trapped in it. The longer you wish things were different, the longer you hold yourself back from what is actually possible. Letting go is not about giving up. It is about accepting what is, so you can finally make space for what could be. And once you reach that point, something changes within you. You stop chasing what is no longer meant for you. You stop forcing things that no longer fit. You stop trying to fix what is already broken beyond repair. Instead, you start focusing on what is in front of you. You begin to invest your time, your energy, and your attention into things that actually add value to your life. You start building relationships that feel right, not ones that constantly drain you. You start setting boundaries, not to push people away, but to protect your peace. And most importantly, you start choosing yourself. Not in a selfish way, but in a necessary way. Because for so long, you may have been prioritizing things that were hurting you. You may have been holding on out of fear, guilt, or habit. But now you are making a different choice. You are choosing growth over comfort. You are choosing peace over attachment. You are choosing a future that is not defined by your past. And that choice is what changes everything. It does not mean life will suddenly become easy. It does not mean you will never feel pain again. But it does mean that the pain you carry will no longer come from things you refuse to let go of. Instead, it will come from the natural challenges of life, the kind that help you grow rather than keep you stuck. And that is a different kind of pain. It is a pain with purpose. It is the kind of pain that moves you forward instead of holding you back. So when you look at your life now, you start to see things more clearly. You see what is worth your energy and what is not. You see what deserves a place in your life and what needs to be left behind. You see yourself not as someone who was broken by the past, but as someone who learned from it and chose to move forward anyway. And that is where your strength truly comes from. Not from holding on, but from knowing when to let go. Not from carrying everything, but from choosing what is worth carrying. Because in the end, your life is shaped by what you decide to keep and what you finally have the courage to release. And when you reach this point, you start to notice something that once felt impossible. The things that used to trigger you no longer have the same effect. The memories that once kept you up at night begin to lose their intensity. The people or situations that once felt like everything slowly become just a small part of your past. Not because they were meaningless, but because you finally stopped giving them control over your present. And that is the quiet power of letting go. It does not announce itself. It does not arrive with a dramatic moment. It shows up in the way you think, the way you respond, and the way you carry yourself every day. It shows up when you choose peace instead of proving a point. It shows up when you walk away instead of holding on. It shows up when you stop needing answers and start accepting reality. And most importantly, it shows up when you finally understand that your energy is limited. You cannot give your attention to everything. You cannot care about every opinion, every mistake, every person who walked in and out of your life. If you try to hold on to all of it, you will only end up exhausted, confused, and stuck. This is why learning what not to care about is just as important as knowing what to care about. Because your life is not defined by everything you experience. It is defined by what you choose to hold on to. And that choice shapes your future. If you hold on to pain, you carry it into your next chapter. If you hold on to resentment, it affects the way you trust. If you hold on to regret, it limits the risks you are willing to take. But if you learn to let go, you create space. Space for clarity, space for growth, space for something better to enter your life. And that is something most people overlook. They think letting go means losing something important, but in reality, it is the opposite. Letting go is what allows you to finally gain control over your life again. Because when you stop holding on to what hurts you, you stop building your life around it. You start making decisions based on who you are becoming, not based on what you went through. You stop asking yourself what if and start asking yourself what now. And that question changes everything. Because what now means you are focused on the present. It means you are no longer trapped in the past. It means you are finally willing to move forward, even if you do not have all the answers. And that is where real progress begins. Not in certainty, but in the willingness to keep going despite uncertainty. Not in having everything figured out, but in trusting yourself enough to figure things out along the way. So if you find yourself still holding on, still replaying the same thoughts, still carrying something that continues to hurt you, take a moment and ask yourself this. Is this helping me become the person I want to be? Or is this keeping me tied to a version of my life that no longer exists? Because the answer to that question is your turning point. It is the moment where you stop waiting for things to change and you start making the decision to change yourself, to release what no longer serves you, to accept what you cannot control, to move forward without needing permission from your past. And it will not happen overnight. There will be days when you feel strong and clear, and there will be days when the past feels heavy again. But every time you choose to let go, even in small ways, you are moving in the right direction. You are building a life that is no longer controlled by what hurt you. You are becoming someone who understands that peace is not found in holding on, but in knowing when to release. And that is the lesson most people spend years trying to learn. That strength is not about carrying everything. It is about having the courage to put things down. So as you move forward from here, remember this. Not everything that enters your life is meant to stay. Not everything that hurts you is meant to define you. And not everything you lose is a loss. Sometimes letting go is not the end of something. Sometimes it is the beginning of everything. And if you are ready to live a life that feels lighter, clearer, and more intentional, then maybe it is time to ask yourself one final question. What are you still holding on to that you already know you need to let go of? Now take a moment and be honest with yourself. Not the version of you that gives quick answers, not the version that avoids discomfort, but the version of you that knows exactly what you have been carrying. What is it? Is it a person you cannot stop thinking about, even though they are no longer part of your life? Is it a mistake that still defines how you see yourself? Is it a moment you wish you could go back and change, even though you know you cannot? Why are you still holding on to it? Is it because you believe it still matters, or is it because you do not know who you would be without it? Think about that carefully. How much of your identity is built around things that hurt you? Are you the person who was rejected, the person who failed, the person who was left behind? Or are you someone who simply experienced those things and never allowed yourself to move beyond them? Because there is a difference. One keeps you stuck. The other allows you to grow. Ask yourself this. If that situation never happened, who would you be today? Would you be more confident, more open, more willing to take risks? And if that is true, then why are you still letting something from the past control who you are today? At what point do you decide that enough is enough? At what point do you stop reliving the same story and start writing a new one? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary, because most people go through life without ever asking them. They stay attached to things that hurt them, not because they want to suffer, but because they never stop to question why they are suffering in the first place. And that is where awareness becomes powerful. When you start asking the right questions, you begin to see the truth more clearly. You begin to notice patterns. Why do you keep attracting the same kind of relationships? Why do you keep doubting yourself even when you are capable? Why do you keep going back to things that you already know are not good for you? Is it really about those things, or is it about what you believe you deserve? Because sometimes holding on is not about the past. Sometimes it is about your beliefs. It is about the idea that this is all you can have, that this is all you are worth, that this is all life is going to give you. But what if that is not true? What if the only reason you are still stuck is because you have accepted something that you should have questioned a long time ago? What if letting go is not just about releasing the past, but about challenging the story you have been telling yourself? The story that says you are not enough. The story that says you always get hurt. The story that says things never work out for you. What if those stories are the real weight you have been carrying? And if that is the case, then letting go is not just an action. It is a decision to rewrite your narrative, to stop defining yourself by what went wrong and start defining yourself by what you choose moving forward. So ask yourself again, what are you still holding on to? And more importantly, what is it costing you? Is it costing you your peace, your confidence, your ability to trust, your chance to grow into something better? Because everything you hold on to comes with a price. And sometimes the price is your future. Now imagine this. What would your life look like if you finally let it go? Not partially, not temporarily, but completely. What would change in the way you think, the way you feel, the way you make decisions? Would you finally take that risk you have been avoiding? Would you open yourself up to new people? Would you stop doubting your worth? And if the answer is yes, then what are you waiting for? Why are you still choosing to carry something that is clearly holding you back? This is where everything becomes clear. You do not need more time. You do not need more answers. You do not need the past to change. What you need is the willingness to let go, to accept that it happened, but it does not have to continue affecting you. To understand that just because something mattered does not mean it still deserves a place in your life. And most importantly, to realize that you have more control than you think. Because at the end of the day, your life is shaped by what you choose to focus on. And if you keep focusing on what hurt you, you will keep reliving it. But if you choose to focus on what is in front of you, on what you can build, on who you can become, then everything starts to shift. So the question is no longer what happened to you. The real question is, what are you going to do about it now? Are you going to keep holding on? Or are you finally ready to let go and move forward? The trap of meaningful suffering. We often treat our emotional pain like a prized possession. We carry it around, polish it with rumination, and show it off as proof of our history or our depth. But Mark Manson's core philosophy suggests a harsh reality. We are often the architects of our own misery because we choose to give a fuck about the wrong things. Holding on to something that hurts you isn't an act of loyalty or strength. It's a failure to prioritize your own values. The problem of entitlement. When we cling to past hurts, we are often operating from a place of victim-based entitlement. This is the belief that because you were hurt, you are somehow special or owed something by the universe. You keep the wound open because, as long as it bleeds, you feel justified in your stagnation. The subtle art isn't about being indifferent. It's about being comfortable with being different. It's about realizing that while you are not responsible for your original trauma, you are 100% responsible for how you handle that trauma today. Responsibility and fault are not the same thing. It might be someone else's fault that they broke your heart or your trust, but it is your responsibility to decide what to do with the pieces. The feedback loop from hell. Holding on to pain creates what Manson calls the feedback loop from hell. You feel anxious about a past event, then you get anxious about the fact that you're still anxious, which makes you feel even more anxious. You start judging yourself for not being over it yet. To break this loop, you have to accept that feeling bad is part of the human experience. The desire for a more positive experience is itself a negative experience. Conversely, the acceptance of one's negative experience is itself a positive experience. When you stop trying to force the pain away and instead accept that it happened, it loses its power to define your current actions. Choosing better values. The reason you can't let go is usually that you are measuring your life by a metric that is outside of your control. If your value is being treated fairly by everyone, you will be in constant pain because the world is inherently unfair. If you are holding onto a grudge or a failure, ask yourself, what value am I protecting right now? Is it the need to be right? Is it the need for revenge? Is it the fear of an uncertain future without that pain to guide you? Manson argues that we should choose values that are process-oriented, internal, and controllable. Instead of valuing validation from an ex, value self-honesty. Instead of valuing perfection, value growth through failure. When you change what you give a fuck about, the things that used to hurt you naturally fall away because they no longer serve your primary values. The importance of saying no. Letting go is ultimately an act of rejection. To move forward, you have to say no to the version of yourself that identifies with that pain. You have to be willing to kill your current identity to let a better one emerge. We stay attached to our hurt because it's familiar. It's a known quantity. Letting go requires stepping into the unknown, which is terrifying. But growth is an iterative process. It is a series of not quites until we reach something slightly more functional. You don't just wake up one day and decide to never feel the hurt again. You simply decide that there are other things in your life that are more important than that hurt. You choose to give your limited fucks to your goals, your health, and the people who actually show up for you. Practical application. To stop holding on, you must embrace the Manson sledgehammer. The realization that you are probably wrong about everything. You are wrong about how much that person's opinion matters. You are wrong about how much that failure defines you. You are wrong about your need for closure. Closure is a myth we tell ourselves to avoid the discomfort of just moving on. Real life doesn't have a neat ending. You just eventually start caring about something else more. Find that something else. Pick a struggle that is worth it and leave the old hurts behind, not because they stopped hurting, but because they stopped being important. The architecture of victimhood. We often believe that by holding on to our resentment, we are somehow punishing the person who hurt us. In reality, we are just building a cage and locking ourselves inside. Mark Manson's philosophy hinges on the idea that our lives are defined by what we choose to suffer for. If you are holding onto a past betrayal or a personal failure, you are essentially choosing to suffer for something that provides zero ROI. You are investing your limited emotional energy into a dead asset. To stop holding on, you must confront the unpleasant truth. You are not special. Your pain is not unique, and your history does not entitle you to a pass on the present. When we cling to hurt, we are often trying to maintain a sense of importance. We think, nobody has ever been treated as badly as I have, because that narrative makes us feel significant. But this significance is a trap. It prevents you from taking action, because action requires you to admit that your pain is just another boring part of life that you have to deal with. The law of substitution. You cannot simply delete an emotion or a memory. The human brain doesn't work that way. Instead, you have to replace it. Manson suggests that the only way to get over a fuck is to find a more important fuck to give. If you are still ruminating on a situation from 3 years ago, it is because your current life is not interesting enough to demand your full attention. You aren't holding onto the hurt. You are suffering from a lack of direction. When you commit to a goal that is difficult, meaningful, and within your control, the old hurts begin to starve. They need the oxygen of your attention to survive. When you redirect that oxygen toward building a better version of yourself, the old grievances naturally wither away. You do let go so much as you outgrow. The responsibility paradox. The most radical thing you can do for your mental health is to take responsibility for your reactions to things that were not your fault. Most people get stuck because they are waiting for an apology that will never come or for a situation to retroactively make sense. They believe that responsibility and fault are the same thing. They are not. If someone hits you with their car, it is their fault. But it is your responsibility to go to the hospital, do the physical therapy, and heal. If you sit in the middle of the road demanding that the driver come back and fix your legs, you will just get hit again. Holding on to things that hurt you is the emotional equivalent of sitting in the middle of the road. It doesn't matter who started it. It only matters who is going to finish it. You finish it by deciding that your future is more valuable than your pride. The fear of the empty space. Why do we keep the things that hurt us? Because even a painful identity is better than no identity at all. If you have defined yourself as the person who was cheated on or the person who failed at their dream, letting go of that hurt means you have to figure out who you are without it. That void is terrifying. But Manson's work suggests that this void is exactly where growth happens. Uncertainty is the root of all progress. By letting go of the hurt, you are admitting that you don't know what happens next, and that is okay. You are trading the certainty of misery for the possibility of something better. You stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What do I do now?" The first question keeps you looking backward. The second question is the only one that can move you forward. The myth of closure. We often hold on to things that hurt us because we are waiting for closure. We believe that if we can just understand the why or get a sincere apology, the pain will magically dissipate. Mark Manson argues that closure is a psychological trap. It's an excuse to stay entangled with a negative experience. By seeking closure, you are essentially saying that your ability to move on is dependent on someone else's actions. True maturity is realizing that the world doesn't owe you an explanation. You don't need the person who hurt you to admit they were wrong in order for you to be right. You don't need a map of the past to build a house in the present. Holding on to the hurt is a way of staying connected to a person or an event that no longer exists. The most subtle art move you can make is to realize that the lack of closure is the closure. The fact that it ended poorly is all the information you need to stop investing in it. The danger of positive thinking. A major reason we struggle to let go of pain is the cultural pressure to always be positive. When we try to force ourselves to be happy while we are still hurting, we create a secondary layer of pain, the guilt of not being over it yet. This is what Manson calls the entitlement of positivity. If you are holding onto something that hurts, stop trying to find the silver lining or the lesson immediately. Sometimes things just suck. Sometimes people are just jerks. Sometimes you just mess up. By allowing yourself to feel the raw, unpolished negative emotion without trying to fix it, you actually allow it to process through your system. It is the resistance to the pain, the desperate need to turn it into something good, that keeps it stuck in your throat. Let it be what it is, a bad experience that you are now finished with. Hooking the audience, questions for reflection. To engage your listeners and force them to confront their own attachments, integrate these questions into your delivery. These are designed to bypass the ego and hit the core of Manson's philosophy. The utility question. If this pain were a physical object you had to carry in a backpack every single day, what exactly is it helping you accomplish right now? Is it making you faster, stronger, or kinder? Or is it just making your back hurt? The identity question. Who would you be tomorrow morning if you woke up and completely forgot that this person or event ever existed? Does that version of you scare you because they have nothing left to complain about? The value question. You only have a limited amount of fucks to give before you die. Are you really comfortable spending 10% of your life's total supply on someone who doesn't even remember your middle name? The responsibility question. We all agree it wasn't your fault that you were hurt, but whose fault is it that you're still miserable today? At what point does the statute of limitations on your excuses finally run out? The death question. If you knew for a fact that you were going to die 1 year from today, would you spend even one more second trying to win an argument that happened 3 years ago? The sacrifice question. Every time you say yes to ruminating on your past, what are you saying no to in your future? What beautiful, new experience are you currently trading away just to keep this old wound fresh? The turning point, the choice of suffering. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid pain, believing that a good life is one where problems don't exist. But Mark Manson argues that a good life is actually defined by having better problems. The turning point in your life occurs the moment you stop asking, "How can I stop hurting?" and start asking, "What is the pain that I am willing to sustain?" Everything involves sacrifice. If you want the athletic body, you have to choose the pain of the gym and the hunger of the diet. If you want the successful business, you have to choose the pain of late nights and the risk of failure. The turning point is the transition from being a passive victim of your circumstances to being an active chooser of your struggles. When you choose your struggle, the pain changes from something that is happening to you into something that is working for you. The do something principle. We often get stuck waiting for a turning point to hit us like a lightning bolt. We wait for inspiration to strike so we can find the motivation to change. This is a fundamental misunderstanding of how human action works. We think the chain goes inspiration, right arrow, motivation, right arrow, action. Manson flips this on its head with the do something principle. The chain actually works in a loop. Action, right arrow, inspiration, right arrow, motivation. The turning point isn't a feeling, it's a physical movement. If you are stuck in a cycle of hurt, don't wait to feel better before you act. Act first. Do anything, no matter how small. Send the email, go for the walk, delete the number. That tiny action becomes the inspiration for the next action, which creates the motivation to keep going. You don't think your way into a new life. You act your way into it. The architecture of change. A real turning point requires you to kill your darling version of yourself. You have to be willing to let go of the identity that relies on being the victim, the underdog, or the misunderstood genius. This is the kill yourself stage of growth, not literally, but egoically. You have to ask yourself, who would I have to become to make this pain irrelevant? Usually, the answer involves becoming someone who cares about something much bigger than their own comfort. The turning point is when your values shift from internal validation and comfort to external contribution and growth. It is the moment you realize that your life is not about you. It's about what you can offer despite the fact that you've been hurt. Hooking the listeners, the pivot questions. The sunk cost question. How much more of your life are you willing to throw away just because you've already spent so much of it being miserable? If you bought a movie ticket and the movie was terrible, would you stay until the end just because you paid for it? The choice question. If you had to choose a struggle right now, one that would be difficult every single day but would actually lead to something you admire, what would it be? And why aren't you choosing it today? The definition question. When you look back on this moment 10 years from now, do you want this to be the chapter where you were defeated? Or do you want it to be the inciting incident that forced you to become someone stronger? The smallest step question. What is one thing you can do in the next 5 minutes that is so small it's almost embarrassing? But that proves you are no longer a victim of your past. If you can't do that, are you really ready for a turning point? The worthiness question. Is the person you are holding a grudge against actually worth the space they are occupying in your head? If they are trash, why are you keeping trash in your living room? The final choice. Every story you tell yourself has an ending. You can choose to let this chapter end with the pain you've been carrying, or you can choose to let it end with the person you are becoming. The truth is, the world doesn't care about your excuses, but it does care about your actions. You have a limited number of days and an even more limited number of things worth giving a fuck about. Choose wisely. This has been a production of Midnight Silence audiobooks. If these words hit a nerve, it's because you're finally ready to hear them. Do not let this be another video you watch and forget. Take one action today that proves you are no longer the person you were 10 minutes ago. If you found value in this perspective, subscribe to Midnight Silence audiobooks. We strip away the noise so you can hear the truths that actually matter. Leave a comment below with the one thing you are choosing to let go of today. Stop carrying what no longer serves you. Silence the world and listen to what's left. We will see you in the next chapter.